This is the story of Nail Siddiqui and his wife Rania Siddiqui. They had been married for 9 years, long enough for silence to carry its own vocabulary. Nail was the kind of man who noticed everything and said little, a quality Rania had once called his greatest strength, and had slowly begun to resent as a kind of emotional withholding. The marriage was not unhappy, not exactly, but it had the feel of a room where the windows hadn't been opened in a long time. Rania had found, over those years, a particular pleasure in being admired, not by her husband, who admired her quietly and consistently, but by people who still found her surprising. And Nail, who understood more than he ever let on, had been watching the slow drift of his wife toward a version of herself he didn't quite recognize. The dinner party was Rania's idea, as most things in her social life were. She had a gift for it, the arrangement of flowers on the table, the selection of wine, the careful curation of guests who would make the evening feel effortless. Nail appreciated this about her, the way she transformed their apartment into something that felt, for a few hours, like the marriage was thriving in a visible, public way. There were 6 of them that evening, Rania's colleague Dina and her husband Tarek. Their old university friends, the Khans, Bilal and Sarish, and Farrak had come alone. He worked with Rania in the architecture firm's creative division, and this was the 3rd time in 2 months he had been invited to something Nail could remember him not being a part of. 3 years ago, he was attractive in the way that men who know they are attractive often aren't. Openly warm, charming in a way that required an audience. He laughed at his own stories just before the punchline, as though he couldn't help it. Nail watched him the way he watched everything. Quietly, the evening moved the way such evenings do. Appetizers, the first bottle of wine, the comfortable noise of people who have known each other long enough to stop being careful. Rania sat at the head of the table, animated, her laugh coming easier than it did at home these days. Nail noted this without naming it to himself. It was Bilal who brought up the renovation project Nail had been overseeing, a school building in the older part of the city. Nail spoke about it briefly, practically. He was not a man who needed the table's attention, and the conversation moved on naturally. But then Farrak made a comment about creative risk in architecture, and Rania leaned forward in the way she did when she wanted to be heard. And for the next 20 minutes, the conversation belonged to the two of them. Not inappropriately, not in any way that could be named, but Nail noticed how Rania gestured more, explained more, laughed at the edges of Farouk's sentences, as though she was anticipating them. After the main course, Tariq asked Nail how he felt about Rania working late so often these days, said it as a joke, the kind of easy teasing married couples endure at tables like this. Nail doesn't mind, Rania said before he could answer. He trusts me completely. She said it lightly, but there was something layered inside it, an assertion and a dare at the same time. That's either very healthy or very naive, Dina laughed. Nail's neither, Rania said. He's just even-tempered. Even-tempered. The word landed in the room like something set down carefully. It was technically a compliment. It did not feel like one. Nail looked at his wife. She was smiling at the table broadly, and she did not look at him when she said it, which told him everything. He reached for his glass and said nothing. Later, after the guests had gone, and Rania was stacking plates with the pleasant efficiency she had after successful evenings, Nail stood at the kitchen window with his hands in his pockets. "We liked having him here," he said. Not accusatory, just an observation. Rania didn't pause. "He's good company. We all liked having him here." "Sure," Nail said. She looked up then, briefly. "Are you going to be strange about this?" "No." She searched his face for the argument she expected. She didn't find it. That seemed to bother her more than if she had. "Good," she said, and returned to the dishes. Nail looked out at the street below. A car passed. The light changed. He stayed at the window for a while after she went to bed, not thinking about anything in particular. just standing in the quiet of the apartment that had lately begun to feel like it was holding its breath. March became April, the way seasons do in a marriage that is busy, unnoticed until suddenly the light is different. Rania worked late on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, which she attributed to a residential project with impossible timelines. Nale did not doubt this. He also did not stop noticing things. A change in the rhythm of her phone, the way she had started placing it face down on the table when he was near. Not always, not dramatically, just often enough. The way she talked about work had shifted. Where she used to name projects and clients, she now spoke in broader strokes. We're behind. The team is stretched. You wouldn't find it interesting. This last phrase was new. She had never before decided what he would and wouldn't find interesting. One Thursday evening, he came home to find she'd already eaten. She hadn't texted to say she was leaving early. The takeaway containers were in the bin, 2 portions, he noticed, without meaning to, and then told himself he was being ungenerous. She could have been hungry and ordered extra. People did that. He sat at the table with his reheated food and his phone and did not think about the containers. He thought about something else, about the version of Rania he'd married, the woman who used to read to him from whatever book she was in the middle of, who mispronounced certain English words in a way she'd never let anyone correct. He tried to remember when she had last done that and found he couldn't place it. They still spoke. They still touched. A hand on the shoulder, passing through the hallway. A brief kiss before sleep, but it had the quality of maintenance rather than connection, the physical equivalent of saying fine when someone asks how you are. That weekend, at Seresh's birthday lunch, Farouk was there again. Nale had not known he would be. He watched for whether Rania had known, and he found his answer in the precise lack of surprise on her face when Farouk walked in, the way she arranged her expression, just a moment too carefully into something neutral. He filed this away. The lunch was warm and easy, as such things were. But twice during the afternoon, Nale noticed Rania glance at her phone beneath the table with an expression of small, private pleasure. The look of someone receiving something they were expecting. Both times, she put the phone away without responding, which was, in some ways, more deliberate than if she had. On the drive home, Rania talked about the food, about Seresh's new house, about a comment Dina had made about her earrings. Nale listened and answered and did not bring up what he had seen. That night, after Rania fell asleep, he lay in the dark for a long time. He was not by nature a man who spiraled. He was not given to jealousy in the consuming, ugly way some men are. What he felt was more precise than that, a kind of sorrow with a very specific shape, not the fear of being left. The grief of watching someone choose to be somewhere else, in their mind, in their wanting, long before their body followed. He thought about whether he had failed her in some way he hadn't identified. He took this question seriously, the way he took most things. He examined the past year, his hours, his attention, his quality of presence at home. He found that he had been, as she said, even-tempered, consistent, perhaps too consistent. Perhaps she had needed disruption, friction, passion expressed in some louder register than he was capable of. But he also knew that this line of thinking, the instinct to locate the reason in himself, was something he had done before in his life, and that it had not always served him well. He decided to pay attention more deliberately, not to catch her, just to understand. Within 2 weeks, he understood. He wasn't looking for it. He was searching his own email for a forwarded document when a wrong tap opened their shared calendar, and he found a recurring blocked slot on Tuesday evenings. Not a meeting name, just initials. F.H. Farouk marked as workshop internal. He knew from Rania herself that there was no standing workshop on Tuesday evenings. She told him as much when complaining about team scheduling 3 months ago. He closed the calendar. He sat with it for a while. Not the fury he might have expected, something quieter and more final, like a door he had suspected was locked turning out to be open, but onto a room he did not want to enter. He did not confront her that night. He made tea. He watched a documentary about migratory birds. He went to sleep. He would wait. Not for revenge, just for the right moment to stop pretending he didn't know what he knew. The second dinner party was Rania's idea too. A month later, a Saturday evening, the same table, the same flowers, different wine. Dina and Tariq again, Bilal and Sarish, and Farak, again alone, arriving with a bottle of Burgundy and the easy confidence of a man who believes a room is glad to see him. It had been a normal week between Nail and Rania. Normal in the careful way things had become, polite, functional, no raised voices, no accusations. Nail had said yes to the dinner without hesitation, and Rania had seemed pleased by this, which told him she had expected resistance. The evening moved along its usual grooves. By the second glass of wine, the table had loosened. Bilal was telling a story about a disastrous camping trip. Sarish was laughing so hard she kept having to set down her glass. It was Dina who started it. Rania had been talking about the residential project, about a client who kept changing his mind on the facade design, and she said, lightly, in the tone of someone sharing an amusing anecdote, that Nail had been a little jealous lately about how much time the project was taking. He's been asking questions, she said, smiling around the table. Very thorough questions. There was gentle laughter. Nail was watching his plate. Can't blame him, Farouk said easily. When your wife works with creative people, you start imagining things. More laughter. Rania shook her head fondly. The gesture of a woman indulging in unnecessary concern. I told him he has nothing to worry about. He knows that, don't you, Nail? Everyone looked at him. He took a slow sip of water. When he put the glass down, he looked at his wife directly for the first time that evening. I wasn't jealous, he said. His voice was level, conversational. I was curious. Rania smiled. Curiosity, jealousy, same energy. Not really, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed his phone on the table. He didn't make a show of it. He simply turned the screen toward the center of the table, where everyone could see. On it was a screenshot of the calendar entries. 8 Tuesday evenings, marked FH. Beside 3 messages, each short, each unambiguous in what they suggested. He had not planned this for tonight, but she had made him a joke in front of people who respected him, and something in him had simply decided. The table went quiet. Not the silence of shock, exactly. More the silence of people recalibrating what they were seeing, what it meant, whether to speak. Rania's expression did not collapse. She was too controlled for that, but something moved beneath her face, some rapid internal adjustment. Nail, she began. You don't have to explain it, he said, picking up his phone and putting it away. Not here. He looked around the table once, not triumphantly, not bitterly, and then resumed eating. The dinner did not recover. Guests found reasons to leave earlier than usual. Farak was the first to go, citing an early morning, his goodbye to the room addressed to no one in particular. Nail shook his hand at the door with a steadiness that seemed to confuse him. When the last guests were gone, Rania stood in the kitchen, not moving, as though waiting for whatever came next. Why did you do that? She asked quietly, not angry. Genuinely asking. You made me a punchline, he said. I thought it was worth context. I could have explained. Could you have? He wasn't combative. He was genuinely asking. She didn't answer right away, which was its own answer. Nothing happened that you couldn't live with, she said finally. It was a strange construction, and she knew it as soon as she said it. The way it named the thing it was trying to minimize. I know, he said. That's not really the point. He went to bed. He did not leave that night, or that week. But something had concluded. He knew it. And by the way she moved through the apartment in the following days, quieter, more careful, he understood that she knew it too. He moved into the spare room the following month. Not dramatically. He mentioned it on a Tuesday morning, the way you mention a scheduling change. I think I'll sleep in the other room for now. And Rania looked up from her coffee and nodded once, as though she had been waiting for a practical decision and was relieved it had come without theater. They still shared the apartment, They were not separated in any legal or official sense, but the quality of their coexistence changed. They became, in the space of a few weeks, the kind of careful roommates who leave each other considerate notes and do not ask about the evenings. Rania, to her own surprise, found the first weeks almost manageable. She went to work. She finished the residential project. She did not contact Farooq, which she had decided the night of the dinner and had stuck to. She understood that she had to demonstrate something, though she was not always sure to whom. To Nail, to herself, to some imagined observer of her choices. She began to reconstruct the narrative slowly. The marriage had been emotionally distant for years, she told herself. Nail was not cruel, but he was absent in the ways that mattered. His attention was always slightly elsewhere, his warmth always slightly managed, never fully given. She had needed to feel seen by someone. That was human. That was understandable. She told this version to Dina over coffee one afternoon, and Dina listened carefully and said very little, which Rania interpreted as agreement. What she did not examine, because to examine it would require a kind of honesty she was not ready for, was the fact that Nail had, repeatedly and consistently, tried to be closer to her. She remembered this in fragments that she did not linger on. The trip he had planned 2 years ago that she had shortened for work reasons. The evenings he had waited up. The conversation he had tried to have, a year before all this, about feeling like she was somewhere else even when she was home. "You're being dramatic," she had told him then. "Everything is fine." She had meant it to be reassuring. She understood now, in the quiet of the spare room's closed door, that what it had actually done was teach him to stop asking. She did not name this to herself as the cause of anything, but it sat in her, undigested. Nail, for his part, was not healing in any visible or satisfying way. He woke at the same time. He went to work. He ate dinner. He slept. He had one long conversation with his younger brother, Wakas, who lived in another city, who listened and asked few questions and then said, "What do you want to do?" And Nail had found that this was the question he had been unable to answer for weeks. What he had thought he wanted, an explanation, an acknowledgement, something that named what had happened between them. He now understood he already had, or as much of it as he was going to get. Rania's explanation on the night of the dinner had been "nothing happened that you couldn't live with." He had turned this sentence over many times. He believed it was true, technically. He also knew that what had actually broken something in him was not what had happened, but what it had revealed: the long period of deliberate deception, the construction of a secret life inside their daily one, the knowledge that she had found a way to feel whole that did not include him. He had been enough for her in practical terms. He had not been enough for whatever she was looking for. He did not know, even now, whether that was his failing or simply who they had become. Spring arrived. He started going to the office earlier, coming home later, filling the hours between with work that occupied enough of his mind that the sadder thoughts settled to the edges. His colleagues noticed he seemed quieter. He smiled when they said this, not because it was funny, but because he had always been quiet and found it interesting that people only named a quality in you when it became inconvenient for them. On a Friday evening in May, he returned home to find Rania in the living room, not reading, not on her phone, just sitting in the chair by the window. She looked up when he came in. "Can we have dinner?" she asked. "Together, just dinner." He paused at the doorway. "I'll make rice," he said after a moment. It was the kind of answer that wasn't yes but also wasn't no, and they both understood this. She went to the kitchen. He changed his clothes. They made dinner in a silence that was different from the careful silence of the past months. Less defended, more tired. After dinner, she said, "I don't think I knew I was doing it. Not at first." He thought about this. "I know," he said. "That doesn't make it, no." He agreed, "It doesn't." The evening ended without resolution, but something had shifted, a degree or two, like a compass adjusting, not toward forgiveness exactly, toward honesty. He washed the dishes. She dried them. Neither spoke, but the silence, at least, had changed its shape. They had one final dinner together on the evening before Nail signed the lease on a small apartment across the city. He had told her 2 weeks before, quietly, sitting at the same kitchen table where he had made tea on the night he first understood everything. She had not cried. She had looked at the table surface for a while and then said, "I suppose this is the end of it then." Not a question, not a plea. He had nodded, and they had not spoken of it again until now. The dinner was her idea. She had cooked, actually cooked, not ordered in, and the apartment smelled the way it used to early in their marriage. When Saturday evenings meant slow meals and wine they'd chosen deliberately, and conversations that didn't need to arrive anywhere, they sat across from each other and ate, and for a while it was almost comfortable in the way that irreversible things sometimes are. Once you stop fighting them. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said. "At the table, that night." He waited. "You said you weren't jealous. You were curious." She turned her glass slowly. "I've been wondering what that meant." "It meant," he said, choosing the words carefully, "that I already knew what I was looking for. I just wanted to understand it well enough to stop doubting myself." She looked at him for a long moment. "I made you doubt yourself." "For a while. I didn't mean to." "I know." He said it without bitterness. He said it like a man who had made his peace with a complicated truth, that the people who cause the most damage are often not the ones who intended it, and that this made it neither better nor worse, only more human. She set down her glass. "Do you think?" She stopped, started again. "Do you think we were ever really?" "Yes," he said, before she finished. "For a long time." She nodded. He thought he saw something move through her face, but she kept it quiet, the way she always kept things quiet when they mattered most. He had once wished she would release more of herself to him. He understood now that she hadn't known how, and that perhaps neither had he, and that this was the saddest version of what had happened between them. Not betrayal in the sharp, deliberate sense, but two people who had never quite found the right words for what they needed and had eventually stopped looking. After dinner, he helped clear the table. She wrapped the leftovers. They moved around each other with the practiced ease of 9 years. And he felt, not grief exactly, but something adjacent to it, the strange mourning of a thing that was not entirely bad, only unworkable. At the door, she hugged him briefly, one arm, the side of her face against his shoulder, for just a moment. "Take care of yourself," she said into his collar. "You too, Rania." He walked down the stairs and out onto the street. The evening was warm, the kind of spring evening that feels like a beginning whether you want one or not. He stood on the pavement for a moment with his keys in his hand, not thinking of anything in particular. He thought of the night he had stood at the kitchen window, watching the street below, the car passing, the light changing. He had been waiting, then, without knowing what he was waiting for. He understood now that he had been waiting to stop waiting, to reach the moment where the uncertainty resolved into something clear enough to act on, to grieve, to release. He started walking. Behind him, in the lit window of the apartment that had been his home for 9 years, a shadow moved through the kitchen. He didn't look back, not out of coldness, but because there was nothing left in that direction that needed his attention. Some marriages do not end with a catastrophe. They end the way a season ends, not in a single decisive moment, but in the slow accumulation of days that quietly shift from one thing into another, until one morning you look up and realize the temperature has changed, and the world you knew is already somewhere behind you. Nail Siddiqui put his hands in his pockets and kept walking into an evening that was his alone.